What's up, everyone? Welcome to TYT. I'm Anna Kasparian. Joining us for this lovely Friday is our very own Jayar Jackson, producer extraordinaire, regular guest on Damage Reports. I don't know, do people also call you Dragon Daddy? I'm not sure, but people should let me know.
Yeah, well, if they do, I would tell them to please stop. And then we can carry on like we like each other, I don't know. Fair enough. Mainly because I have no idea what that would mean. And I've been hearing the dragging squad every Wednesday, JR Wednesdays, by the way, on TDR. I hear it every Wednesday and I still don't know what it means.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, if anybody were to be called Dragon Daddy within the TYT work environment, it would be John, so I get it. I just don't know, like, if I want to really understand the extent of that whole situation. But what I do want to talk about today is how incredible our audience is. You guys are amazing and you guys give me life, honestly. Yesterday, Cenk and I got into a pretty heated discussion about an issue that obviously we both care about, I care about a lot. And I was worried about how the audience was gonna respond to that. But what I really appreciated was, I have a working relationship with Cenk where we can challenge each other and there's no hard feelings. But more importantly, you guys got something out of that conversation and it gave you some perspective. It made you want to learn more about the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh. And it made me realize we have the smartest people watching this show. I'm so grateful for you guys. And considering how incredibly intelligent and brilliant you guys are, it makes me feel even more proud that we're mostly funded by you. And as you guys know, we've been doing this fundraiser. We're trying to raise $200,000 each month till the end of the year to keep TYT sustainable. And we just got a massive matching donation from Ashley Wilkes, who has been a longtime supporter of the show. He's actually donated money to our cause before, but what he wants to do is encourage everyone to keep contributing to this fundraising effort. tyt.com/go is where you can contribute if you would like to. And I want to talk a little bit about who Ashley is, because just learning about him was pretty incredible. So he lives in a remote part of Minnesota. He's surrounded by people who are pretty conservative. And he's been holed up, as many of us have been during this pandemic. And so he says that watching this show really helps him get through it. And he specifically gave a shout out to the TY Tarantino special, which, I thought it was really fun. I was drunk when I was doing it and I was open about that. But it was a fun time. I really enjoyed it. I thought everyone's personal stories and how we all ended up at TYT was great. But he loved it and he wants to encourage anyone who hasn't seen it yet to check it out. And he says he believes in our mission and that we represent a critical voice in promoting the kind of progressive change that the country desperately needs. He also has incredibly nice things to say about Cenk, me, John, JR, and even about Brett. That was like a special note in the section here. And so thank you. We love you guys. Thank you to Ashley for your support. On my hardest days, I think about you guys, and it helps me to keep going. So thank you.
It's true, and and just a side note on the audience and everything. Specifically, Ashley, awesome. Thank you so much. There's so many people that are on that level with us, but I interact with the audience a lot, and I love it. It's a, we feel like I hear people say they feel like they know us, and I feel like I know them, and it's just as important that we feel like we know you, especially when it comes to the way, social media and craziness that happens. So the real people that you come across are even more, I think, more important to really have the opportunity to feel like So everybody that I talk to and interact with on all the social media platforms, I know you, I love you, I feel like you're like a good friend of mine.
I love starting the show with the mushy stuff. Makes me feel good. Okay, well, it's good that we got ourselves feeling good because the next story is infuriating and it's an update on Breonna Taylor.
They never gave us the opportunity to deliberate on anything but the charges for Hinkelson. That was it. As a matter of fact, when they announced that those were the only charges, it was an uproar in that room. There was several more charges that could have gone forward on all of those officers, or at least the 3 shooters.
Two of the grand jurors who heard the case against Louisville, Kentucky cops who entered the home of Breonna Taylor with a no-knock warrant and then murdered her, shooting multiple rounds into the apartment. They've come out and they've said that the district attorney, or I should say the attorney general in the state of Kentucky, has not been forthcoming, has not been honest about the actual charges that were presented to the grand jury during this case. They didn't even get the opportunity to deliberate on possible homicide charges. Now, these two jurors felt the need to come forward after seeing how, the prosecutor spoke about the grand jury's decision and felt that he was being misleading and misrepresented what really happened. So the jurors received permission to come out and speak. They don't want their identity to be released because of safety concerns, but they have spoken to CBS's This Morning, and I think their side of the story is really, really important. Remember, not a single one of those cops was charged with homicide. No one was charged criminally for what happened to Breonna Taylor specifically. There was only one cop, Officer Hankerson, who ended up facing charges for wanton endangerment because he ran into the parking lot and just started shooting indiscriminately. And some of those gunshots went into an apartment where there was a pregnant woman. Luckily, she wasn't hurt, but seems like nothing's gonna happen in regard to criminal charges with Breonna Taylor. And the grand jurors want to explain to the public why that is. Let's watch the first video.
At their request for their safety.
They didn't give us the charges up front when they gave us all of that testimony over 20 something hours, and then to say that these are the only charges that they're coming up with. It's like, well, what did we just sit through? And then to be told that we're not charging them with anything else, to me, it was a betrayal.
Why is this so extraordinary, Kevin?
Normally, the grand jurors are presented with the law and the charges so that they can listen to the facts with an open mind and apply those facts to the law, almost as a roadmap.
What happened here?
What happened here was it was done in the complete reverse.
What stands out to you the most?
From a legal perspective, it looked like they weren't following the grand jurors, and they only wanted the grand jurors to follow them, which is contrary to the actual rule.
So while I've never been on a grand jury, I have served as a juror before, and the thing that really did stand out to me was that, yeah, the charges, they explain what the charges are in the very beginning of the trial, and then they explain to you what needs to be proven and what the burden of proof is in order to find someone guilty. And the whole reason why they do that up front is so when you're listening to the evidence, right? Then you know what to listen for. You need to find the actual evidence that proves the charges that are being brought forth. And then when you're deliberating, you can cite the evidence that you heard that either proves that the person did the crime or disproves it. That's how it's supposed to work. They didn't even tell the jurors, according to these two grand jurors, what the charges were until after they heard all the evidence.
So the grand jury has to come up with the decision of whether or not to proceed with these charges, right? Right. Again, everyone is expecting on this day to get a yes or no. In fact, I think many people didn't expect to get anything on these charges. So the anger was there, but there wasn't much surprise there. I got to be honest. Now, if you weren't even presented with the opportunity to deliberate over the charges or over what the charges could be, how could you charge someone? This isn't a verdict type of thing that they were looking through. This isn't them deliberating on whether or not they're gonna send these guys to prison for 20 years. That wasn't it. That was in order to go forward with the trial that encompasses these charges. Not done, not done. So we don't get the opportunity to get to dive deep enough into the details given to a jury to decide whether or not these guys are guilty or not. To decide whether or not the whole everything that happened, all the actions that happened on that night were justified. Honestly, to get to the real scene of the story, because we got two opposing accounts that were told to everybody. So we didn't even get that far. And this is what we're arguing about, whether or not we should get charges, bro. Charges. And this is what we didn't get a chance to get.
Exactly. And so and thank you for differentiating between a grand jury and a regular jury. A regular jury needs to either find the person guilty or not guilty. Mm-hmm. In this case, yes, you're correct. They're trying to figure out whether or not there's enough evidence to continue on with the charges that have been presented by the prosecutor. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, as you mentioned, the prosecutor didn't even give them a chance to consider homicide charges. And that is explained by the grand jurors in the next video. Let's take a look at that.
Our investigation showed, and the grand jury agreed, that Mattingly and Cosgrove were justified in the return of deadly fire.
When he stated that there were 6 possible murder charges and that the grand jury had agreed that those didn't apply, the first time I heard the word 6 possible murder charges was in that news conference.
It wasn't presented to you in the grand jury deliberations?
No. And personally, when I do something, I take responsibility for it. We had not done that.
I really felt that this was all Cameron. This was up to him. We didn't get a choice in that at all. So I was livid. By the time I heard what he was saying, everything that came out of his mouth, I was saying liar, because we didn't agree to anything. We never met Cameron.
Yes, and that's Attorney General Daniel Cameron, who allegedly lied to the public about what the potential charges were, lied about what the juries or the grand jurors agreed on. JR, take it away.
Okay, so as we again, it's almost we have to remind everybody what's been happening since that day when they said that the grand jury decided not to pursue charges. Since then, one particular juror that's been anonymous has been trying to come forward to tell his side of the story, to tell what he said happened and what he experienced, and then what the result was told to the public. There's been stonewalling, there's been pushback, there's been excuses as to why we can't let this guy talk. There's been, we're looking to protect him. All these things have been said since then, so that this juror won't speak about what actually happened. Nobody finds that fishy. Nobody finds that as a reason to investigate why the people that are in charge of whether or not this grand jury saw the evidence that they claimed that the grand jury saw, whether or not the grand jury can come forward and say so or not. Why is that the problem suddenly? There's such a lack of credibility from everybody on this side of this story. If you put yourself in that position of that's your family member, you'd be pulling your hair out, you'd be in front of that courthouse every day, you'd be knocking on Cameron's door, calling him, sending him emails, trying to get something going, because that's your loved one's life that was lost. And we didn't get a chance to even deliberate on the actual evidence. Now, Donald Trump likes to say he's done more for black people than anyone else since Abraham Lincoln. And that's based off of his criminal justice reform. So I just want to point out, what part of criminal justice reform is going into fixing things like this, where you have a state's prosecutor and a Cameron in here stonewalling, hiding evidence, lying about what they were given, what was given to the grand jury. He just talks about releasing people that were wrongfully convicted, or maybe convicted and given super long sentences, and that's all there is to it. What else is there before these people get in prison? What about when they've spent 15 years in prison that they shouldn't have spent there? What about the dereliction of duty from our justice system in not allowing these things to happen? Or actually, then actionably going after people when they shouldn't, and knowingly presenting wrong evidence. This happens countless times, over and over and over again. How many times have we heard stories about people in this country who end up in jail on rape charges, and we found out that the prosecutor was hiding information that absolutely and utterly exonerated them, and they said, well, I'm gonna go forward with this because all I need is a conviction. How many times have we seen that? What part of the criminal justice system and criminal justice reform is changing that part? Because right now, we have Breonna Taylor, who was murdered back earlier this year. And then we have, and the majority of the year after that, instead of doing the right thing because there's 4 or 5 cops that were in the wrong, along with them getting this no-knock warrant in the first place under false pretenses. This goes so far from just releasing someone from prison that was wrongfully put there or had an extended sentence that probably shouldn't have been there. We need to sweep this whole thing. We need to pick up this whole thing and dust it off and find out what the real approach that we need to do to change things are. I think many people don't know exactly how corrupt and upside down this system is. It's not just about putting people in prison once you've done something wrong, or maybe there was some evidence was overlooked. There is an aggressive, actionable approach to putting people in jail because it's easy to do so. And after you do so and people fight back, the public's gonna say, well, what did they do? What have we heard about Breonna Taylor? What have we heard about Kenneth Walker, her boyfriend, who had to go through the trauma? Oh, well, what were they doing? Oh, what happened with their ex-boyfriend? That's what we get from folks because they know that the public has been brainwashed long enough to believe that certain people in this society deserve to be in prison. And if you can't find the evidence on them, they must have done something else. They know that, and so they can go forward with these types of actions. Where's the reform on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, you make one great point after the next. I don't even know where to start, but I'll start with the last thing you just said. There have been some states that have passed laws banning no-knock warrants. Okay, fine, that's a good start, I guess. But what we're experiencing right now, what we're seeing happen in real time in the state of Kentucky is a very well orchestrated attempt to cover up the wrongdoing of the cops here because they keep changing their story. There's been some evidence of, evidence tampering on the scene. I know I keep repeating this point over and over again because it boggles my mind that it's not getting the attention that it should get. They lied about the post office telling them that there were suspicious packages being sent to Breonna Taylor's home. That is what they used. That is what they cited to a judge in order to obtain the no-knock warrant. And then later, a post office inspector came out and said, that is not true. No one has said that to the police department. That is relevant because Absolutely. It shows you that they lied. They lied to a judge in order to obtain a warrant. Okay, and then on top of all of this, you see how the state prosecutor is telling the public one thing while telling these jurors something completely different, not giving them the opportunity to deliberate on possible homicide charges. And so you also mentioned Kenneth Walker, Breonna Taylor's boyfriend, and the trauma that he experienced. In this next clip, we're gonna get part of his 911 call, which is heartbreaking every single time I hear it. But the jurors also talk about just the credibility of Kenneth Walker versus the cops in this case. Let's watch.
911, Operator Harris, where is their emergency?
I don't know what's happening. Somebody kicked in the door inside my girlfriend.
The thing that stood out to me when I was talking to him, he said, why would I call 911 if I thought it was the police?
Mm-hmm. That resonated with me because he didn't know who it was that was coming in. He had no idea. You could hear the distress. Everything about what he said was believable. Mm-hmm. It made sense all the way through.
You found him credible?
Yes.
Totally believable.
Did you find the police credible?
No.
No, there are too many inconsistencies in their story. Now I understand that, in a situation like that, you may not remember, but I didn't find their testimony credible.
What was your understanding about what happened that night?
It was a mess. It didn't seem to me that there was any organization or almost any leadership in the whole operation.
From the evidence that I heard, this thing started out downhill to begin with. You don't need 7 cops to go up to somebody's door and knock on it and say, we're here to do an investigation at 1 o'clock in the morning. It kept going downhill from there. It was one mistake right after the other one, right after the other one. They covered it up.
They covered it up. I mean, you have a grand juror saying they covered it up. And since we're speaking about Kenneth Walker and the trauma that he had to experience on that insanely tragic night, I think it's important to mention that Louisville Metro Police Sergeant Jonathan Mattingly is actually countersuing Kenneth Walker for emotional distress. So Mattingly was struck in the leg by Kenneth Walker's warning shot. Remember, he didn't know that they were cops. They were plainclothes cops who barged into the home. They claimed that they announced themselves. Multiple witnesses said that that was not true. Now, Mattingly, Walker's bullet struck Mattingly in the leg, causing, this is what the lawsuit says, severe trauma, mental anguish, and emotional distress. Walker's conduct in shooting Mattingly is outrageous, intolerable, and offends all accepted standards of decency and morality. That is what the lawsuit against Breonna Taylor's boyfriend says. Okay, Breonna Taylor's dead. She bled out on the floor. And Kenneth Walker experienced that. Remember, they arrested Kenneth Walker.
Absolutely. And
then later let him go with no charges. It's so disgusting.
While arresting him, wish they had shot him. Saying all these horrible things to him as they have him walk out and screaming at him, and yeah, they got dogs barking, ready to shoot him, and then he wasn't shot. And it's like, you're lucky that you weren't. This is the emotional distress that somehow he laid upon them in your countersuit. It furthers the way that you can see the way certain folks will see them. It's like, well, he's just Kenneth Walker, a black guy that was traumatized when his girlfriend was murdered in the house, and he shot back because, well, we don't believe in the Second Amendment. Do we believe in you protecting your home from intruders? Do we or do we not believe in it? Every time we've had any kind of gun approach in this country, we see it as applies to certain folks, but it doesn't apply to the ones that we don't think deserve those protections and those rights. So especially when you show that you have one and that you can provide that kind of protection for yourself, which didn't work out for them, sadly, on that day, you then go and say, let me go ahead and see if I can get some more out of them, just to really dig it in and let them know how much I despise his existence. That's all this means. This is a big middle finger to the rest of himself and his family and everyone else that's associated with this case. It's, you know what, you may have thought that we hated you, but let me go ahead and confirm that for you. That's what this lawsuit means. It's frustrating, man. And and the only way that you can pull something off like this and think that you can convince enough people that it's okay is, again, you talked about how it's almost blood curdling to hear him screaming on the phone right after Breonna was shot. The only way you can take that and think, unlike the juror that said, I could hear the pain in his voice. Like, how could he fake that? The only way you can not hear that is to not think he's not the same kind of human being you are. He doesn't have emotions. When gunshots happen at 1 a.m. or whatever time it was in the middle of the night, when 30 shots rang through your house, the only people who cannot be worried about that are like aliens. They're non-humans. That's how bigotry and racism allow you to see people no matter what the circumstance is. So, black folks have these superhuman tendencies. They can take 35 shots to the chest because they're built by like some other kind of creature. And then when you traumatize them, they're not actually hurt. That phone call was fake. He called the cops on the cops because that makes sense. It doesn't have to make sense. As long as you hate that person, you can say anything you want about them and come to that conclusion.
Yeah, I mean, every time I hear that 911 call, I also think about Philando Castile's girlfriend and
the girl in the back
of a police. With her daughter, young daughter, little girl, consoling her mom as she's like breaking down and crying. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, we have some new documentation and new evidence of immigrants who have died in ICE custody, and the numbers are insane. Don't miss that story, and we have more stories to share with you. We'll be right back.
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
Everybody, welcome back to TYT. Few announcements and then we'll move on. Aspiration is one of our wonderful partners, and they're doing and randomly selecting 4 winners to join Cenk in a private panel discussion about the election after the elections take place. And all you have to do to qualify is have an Aspiration account. So if you've already opened one up, you don't have to do a thing. If you haven't, just go to aspiration.com/TYT to learn more. And since we're talking about the elections, I think it's only fair for me to remind you there's only 4 days left until the elections take place, and TYT will be providing special coverage of the election, of course. It's gonna be like 12 hours straight of programming, and it's gonna be great. I mean, Asher Caulfield's been working really, really hard in producing, so is Judith. The team that like puts together specials, I'm always in awe of them because they do really great work and they're meticulous. So don't miss it. So the special coverage begins starting at 1 p.m. Eastern time, 10 a.m. Pacific. And it's gonna be a kickoff with the damage report. And I'm gonna be on there. So I will be joining the Dragon Squad and conversing with the Dragon Daddy about the election. It'll be awesome.
You're gonna need a dragon nickname. You need one.
I know. Yeah, let's pause. All right, so let me read a few member comments and then we'll move on. Lisa says, I'm 72 today. Happy birthday. I would love a happy birthday. TYT is a godsend. Lisa, thank you for supporting us. Thank you for being a member, and I hope you have a wonderful birthday. COVID Fefe says, as a fellow Armenian, I love your presence on TYT, Anna. Thank you so much for covering issues Armenians are facing currently in Nagorno-Karabakh. I love that you are able to speak your mind on this show and that you are bringing awareness to this when mainstream media doesn't cover it much. Thank you, I really appreciate that. And thank you for having an open mind about the show. That means more to me than I could even express. And then Anna Jackson in the super chat says, okay, JR and Anna, I got Idarola, Brett, and David Dole to tell me a Halloween memory. Dole was a clown and Brett showed a pic. What's yours? I'm not a Halloween fan, so I don't really have like fond Halloween memories, to be honest with you. However, my niece was born in late October, so for the first time, I'm looking forward to Halloween, like the actual day, because I'm gonna dress up and have fun with her. So
yeah, your Halloween memories will be the best through your kids. I had one, but it was just my brother and I were trick or treating late, and a drunk driver came tearing down the neighborhood road and ran into a bunch of people's yards, and we had to run away. That's my Halloween memory from the child.
Oh my gosh,
it was crazy. It seemed like a movie. It was really weird.
Just be careful out there, guys. Jeez.
Yes,
all right.
Absolutely.
Well, let's talk about what's happening with ICE. I mean, it's been a while since we had heard about immigrants in detention and what's been happening with them. But BuzzFeed News actually did a pretty fantastic report and demanded documents about migrant deaths, and the numbers are pretty devastating. So more than 40 immigrants have died in ICE custody since 2017. Dozens of immigrants have died in US custody. And BuzzFeed News was able to learn about this through a successful lawsuit that they filed against the Department of Homeland Security. Now, at some point during the Trump administration, DHS decided that they would no longer publicly release reports about the health conditions of these immigrants. And luckily, because of the reporters over at BuzzFeed News, we now know that dozens of people have died. Many of them have been denied the medical treatment and the care that they needed. I'll highlight some of the examples for you. One man from Jamaica, for instance, who had an aggressive but treatable form of cancer, was locked in solitary confinement for over a week without receiving medical care and died a month later. A Honduran transgender woman who sought asylum in the United States was severely dehydrated, showed signs of starvation, and wasn't given antiretroviral medication before she died. And that's according to the local medical examiner of complications of AIDS. And there were people who were kept in conditions that were so horrific that at least 3 of these individuals killed themselves, even though they were supposed to be under close observation, since it was known that they were a risk to themselves. But of course, the private prisons that they were held in didn't really care much about providing the care that these people needed. What they cared about was ensuring that they took taxpayer money in the form of government grants to essentially dehumanize and treat these people as if they're not people at all. In multiple instances, guards who were supposed to observe detainees placed in solitary confinement for extra monitoring falsified records to hide apparent dereliction of duty. In at least 2 cases at Eloy Detention Center in Arizona and Adelanto Detention Facility in California, people died while they were not being watched, but should have been. I mean, like you read these stories, like the very specific examples that were provided by these documents, and it just, this is what we're doing, right? This is what our government is doing. And every single time, look, I get that Obama didn't have a great record on immigration. He had a pretty bad record when it came to deportations. That's why he was referred to as deporter in chief. But he didn't have 40 immigrants die while he was in charge. You know, like the reason why I bring that up is because every time we talk about the type of threat Donald Trump is to people in this country, to immigrants, to asylum seekers, to all sorts of people in disadvantaged situations, I always hear the whataboutism. Oh, but what about Obama? What about Obama? What about Obama? Okay, Obama didn't purposely separate children from their parents at the border as they were seeking asylum. Okay, Obama didn't, he actually stopped using private prisons on a federal level, and then Trump came in and he re-implemented the use of private prisons on a federal. I'm telling you this because the false equivalencies drive me crazy. Obama deserved the criticism for what he did, but let's not pretend like Obama's cruelty was the same as what we're seeing under Trump. Trump dehumanizes these people. Trump does not care about a single individual in this country, much less people who come here seeking asylum. And dozens of people, including children, have died as a result of that. So yeah, you can take your whataboutism and shove it.
Yeah, and by the way, every time there's one of those comparisons about the negative things that President Obama did when he was in office, the first question that I'm always asking is, so where was your criticism for him doing that at the time? Were you upset about the way he was treating immigrants? Were you upset about his deportations? So these conservatives that like to talk about, well, Obama did this first and Obama did that. Were you talking about that when Obama was doing it, or were you okay with what Obama was doing? Those few things that he was doing that coincided with what you agreed with, and how you really don't give a damn about immigrants, especially folks that are fleeing their home countries, seeking some kind of existence that isn't threatening their life every time. So there's layers to the way that ICE was approaching this. And as you already pointed out, there was these dereliction of duties. There was the ways that they weren't going to actually, they weren't checking these, they weren't doing their welfare checks. Medicines weren't provided. There's one particular guy that was put in solitary confinement, all those things that you mentioned. After doing those things, and then as you point out, BuzzFeed had to make sure that they forced their way into getting sued, their way into getting the information. The information we discovered was then they went with, we just talked about the Breonna Taylor case, a cover up over every one of these instances. And then once you found out the real things that happened, which was the transgender woman who died, and they didn't provide her with any kind of medical treatment. They said it was a heart attack, and they looked further into it and found that they did know about what was going on. They tried to cover it up. Then another guard who didn't do his duties as far as following and checking in and doing his welfare checks. He said, no, I mean, he falsified his records for when he went in, but the video evidence didn't provide that. If those things weren't discovered, if the lies weren't shown and illustrated just how blatant they were, they would have just continued to get away with it. So how many instances of this have happened where they did just get away with it, where they did lie about it and say, no, man, I did my job, it's okay. And then we just believed them and moved on. How many times did that happen? For these few times we found out that it didn't.
Plenty. Yeah, it's not sure outrageous. Plenty.
And we just continue on down the same road. These places aren't shut down. The whole thing isn't changed. We're not worried about the 545 kids that were still separated from their parents. We're not worried about any of that. It's just cover it up because that's just the way we do things here. And they go through, there's so many stories about this. We just talked about a few weeks ago where women, the uteruses are getting scoped and removed, and medical treatments done by this doctor doctor that decided to do this because that's just the way they feel it should happen.
Yeah, they're essentially sterilizing women without their consent, and they won't ever be able to have children again as a result of that, or ever if they don't already have children. It's the most hideous, disgusting, cruel, I mean, shameful. In another instance, surveillance footage showed a detainee falling out of his wheelchair and struggling to move, but nurses told a guard who expressed concern that the detainee was faking or exaggerating his symptoms. Later that day, the detainee died.
Yeah, because you know why? Because if someone's in a state of emergency and you don't care about their life, you can say they're faking. Oh, they must be faking. Why would they be faking? To get where? If they're faking and you go check on them, does that give them a free pass to leave? Is that how it works? Or does it mean you actually don't care what will happen to them? Is it you think that's too much trouble for me?
No.
Yeah.
No, and also JR, I mean, remember, we can't forget all of the moments where Trump administration officials, particularly Jeff Sessions, before Trump decided to fire him for having a little bit of a backbone over recusing himself. Jeff Sessions said the quiet parts out loud when he said, no, we're doing this as a deterrent. This is intentional. Taking the children away from the border, that was a policy. It was their zero tolerance policy, intentionally implemented to deter future asylum seekers. Treating them with this type of cruelty once they're detained is intentional. And we're paying for it. I want everyone to understand that. It isn't just that ICE is and the Department of Homeland Security is carrying out these disgusting, cruel, awful policies. Our money, our taxpayer money pays for that. You think private prisons are funded through investors only? No, they're mostly funded, 95% funded through us. And so while our federal government gives us a giant middle finger during this pandemic when people need financial relief, at the same time, our money is still getting funneled into these disgusting programs that murder people, that put people in solitary confinement or leave them to die after they've fallen from a wheelchair. That's what's happening. This is America. This is American exceptionalism.
And we'll keep trying to pursue this. I'm trying to think of this hologram. I'm not sure what it is they're trying to, who we are, this shining light on the hill, but we continue to do things like this. The only reason you try and cover it up is to continue that facade of what we say we are. So if you want to continue, just, I'm so frustrated. I totally forgot what I was going to say, Anna. I totally forgot.
It's all right. It happens to me too. When you get so frustrated with the story. But we do need to take a break. So maybe you'll remember from the break and come back and share. But when we come back, we have more news, including, Walmart has decided to take guns off its shelves, but not for the reasons that you would think they should take guns off the shelves.
At TYT, we frequently talk about all the ways that big tech companies are taking control of our online lives, constantly monitoring us and storing and selling our data. But that doesn't mean we have to let them. It's possible to stay anonymous online and hide your data from the prying eyes of big tech. And one of the best ways is with ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN hides your IP address, making your activity more difficult to trace and sell to advertisers. ExpressVPN also encrypts 100% of your network data to protect you from eavesdroppers and cyber criminals. And it's also easy to install. A single mouse click protects all your devices. But listen, guys, this is important. ExpressVPN is rated #1 by CNET and Wired magazine. So take back control of your life online and secure your data with a top VPN solution available, ExpressVPN. And if you go to expressvpn.com/TYT, you can get 3 extra months for free with this exclusive link just for TYT fans. That's expressvpn.com/TYT. Check it out today.
Be right back. Hey everyone, welcome back to TYT. Anna and JR with you. I really want to get to the next 2 stories, so I'm going to get right to it, starting with Walmart. So Walmart has decided to take guns and ammunition off of its shelves, leading up to the general election. And you can understand why, especially when you consider the numerous right-wing influencers who have called for civil war in this country, or the fact that, you have 17-year-olds like Kyle Rittenhouse showing up to protests in states he doesn't live in, to essentially gun down 2 people in cold blood. There have been numerous examples of Boogaloo Boys, for instance, walking up to police officers in their police cruisers to ambush and shoot them to death. And so, yeah, there's a lot of fear about unrest involving the election. But as you read the story and you learn more details, Walmart seems to be more concerned about Black protesters. That's what they're worried about. Let me give you the details. Statement from Walmart. They say, we have seen some isolated civil unrest. And as we have done on several occasions over the last few years, we have moved our firearms and ammunition off the shelves or off the sales floor as a precaution for the safety of our associates and customers. Now, they will still be selling guns. They're just not gonna have the guns on the shelves because they're worried about protesters breaking into a Walmart or breaking into Walmarts and stealing the guns on the shelves. That's what they're concerned about. That's what they're worried about. Guns and ammunition will still be available for purchase at the stores, Walmart said, but won't be available on the sales floor.
Well, they can have a weird, hateful reason for this, or I guess a bias-based reason for this. But in reality, I mean, as long as it gets something done to a degree, I mean, I don't know if being on the sales floor really lowers your gun sales. Is it out of sight, out of mind? I'm trying to find some wrinkle in this. Because by the way, the whole thing about making sure that protesters don't break in and take guns off the sales floor, that part, I'm unsurprised by that. 100%. So, I mean, if I'm trying to find some wrinkle in this, that at least maybe other folks that are looking to come out and cause riots, maybe shoot some innocent protesters, maybe just go riot in the streets if their guy doesn't win, then maybe it'll deter them from really realizing that Walmart still has guns there. That's really the best thing I can get out of this, because this is par for the course for me. This is the way it's always been with gun rights in America. And we talked about Breonna Taylor earlier today, and how her boyfriend shot back at cops, and he's being countersued by one of the cops who was involved in killing his girlfriend. And we can just take that story and move along and say, well, it's fine, it's normal. He was a black guy, right? Shooting that gun, right? He was still black, right? Okay, yeah. It's cool that we decide that he's not allowed to have one. So in this case, I mean, this goes along with the way America does things. I just hope it deters other folks from buying them.
Yeah, well, part of the problem is, as we know, the right wing is already pretty armed. And I think that the intention behind the decision to do this does matter. There was a recent episode of The Daily, and it had to do with concerns of civil unrest around the election. And so I was like, I haven't been listening to that podcast as regularly as before. I thought that seemed like an interesting topic. So I started listening to it, expecting, Democratic voters, independent voters, whatever, fearful about election day, especially with all the voter intimidation we've been seeing. These armed people showing up, Trump supporters showing up to in-person voting locations or ballot drop-off locations to specifically intimidate voters. So I thought that's what it was gonna be about. No. It was about right-wingers who feel like they don't have enough guns, and they think that people who are fighting for civil rights are the threat. And by the way, in this BuzzFeed article highlighting the story about what Walmart is doing, this is stated. The decision comes as Walmart in Philadelphia was targeted by looters after the killing of Walter Wallace Jr. One target for looters was the Port Richmond Walmart. Looters were seen carrying clothes and appliances, and ripped boxes of ammunition were also seen abandoned on the ground just outside the store. So they're just worried about these guns, ending up in the hands of people that they don't like. Like, if the only threat was, and by the way, I don't want looters to steal guns either. Like, I'm not trying to be an apologist for that. I'm not in favor of that. I think that's dangerous and awful. But the fact that the other threat is completely ignored is devastating, even as we've seen the FBI report multiple times that the biggest threat in this country is right-wing gang members, right? The FBI says that, but no. Well, Walmart's not worried about them. Like right-wingers want to come in and buy guns and like threaten people with them as they're trying to exercise their right to vote. That's okay. Well, we're really worried about protests.
Yeah, because this is a little bit what's scary. I don't live far from an indoor gun range, and honestly, it's hidden in plain sight. If I don't pay attention to everything I drive by because I'm just that type of person, I know everything that's around me. You wouldn't know that it's there. But if previous to this year, this pandemic happening, if I didn't know it, I would know it now, because the line is literally out the door and down the street every day. Every day, there's people lining up outside of this gun range, and they're practicing, and they're practicing, and they're practicing. And now, I'm sure they come from all kinds of political leanings. But what's definitely happening is this assumption that good old boys, these good old conservatives and Republicans are the ones with the gun rights and have all the guns, and we're gonna come shoot and kill you. When that perception has always been the norm here, it's never been the reality. Number one, libs love guns. Democrats love guns. Folks that live in gun-toting states love their guns. So when you keep thinking you're gonna start this whole unrest and I'm gonna come kill you, and nobody's gonna do anything in response, honestly, I'm not even sure that they don't see that part. It's kind of what they want. There's been this whole war that they've been trying to stoke for years now, and there's a new avenue for it. And no matter what happens on election night, there's people that are prepared no matter what, just because it's for fun. I don't know, or just to completely upend the country because they dislike it here. I'm not sure what really the motivation is outside of just your pride and wanting to shoot someone because you've had your guns getting dusty on the shelf and you haven't shot anyone long enough. I'm not sure what the motivation is, but it's not one-sided. And if you ever thought it was one-sided, let me tell you it this way: it's not one-sided anymore. If that's what you think was the problem before.
Well, I want to talk about Don Jr.'s insanely callous statements regarding coronavirus today. So let's talk about that. Don Jr. recently went on Fox News and, had some thoughts about the 125,000 Americans who have died from coronavirus. He's pretty callous, to say the least, and we should probably listen to what he has to say and debunk it, because this type of disinformation is not only harmful, but insanely insulting to the family members who have lost loved ones due to Donnie Boy's father completely bungling the response to COVID. Let's watch.
These people are truly morons. You know what I mean? And I like how they go after Scott Atlas because he's not an epidemiologist, but Sanjay Gupta now magically is. I mean, give me a break, Laura. The reality is this. If you look, I put it up on my Instagram a couple days ago because I went through the CDC data because I kept hearing about new infections. But I was like, well, why aren't they talking about deaths? Oh, because the number is almost nothing, because we've gotten control of this thing. We understand how it works.
The number is almost nothing, JR. Now, let me state something that is important. Because so many people have contracted the virus, and because our healthcare providers and professionals have had so much experience in treating people with coronavirus. I mean, last week alone, 500,000 Americans contracted the virus. They have gotten better at treating people, and so the death rate has gone down. However, the number is insanely high. 125,000 Americans already dead, and more are to come as a result of Trump's administration refusing to listen to CDC guidelines, politicizing the use of masks. I mean, the list goes on. 225,000, people. Was I misspeaking?
Yeah, 125. I got you though. You said 125, but it's fine.
Oh, my bad. 225,000 people. I'm sorry, I totally misspoke. I hate when I do that. But yeah, it's one failure after the next, and to refer to that number as like it's nothing.
It's just nothing. Again, flip the script. And I hate having to do this so many times because it's so simple to flip the script. So if you have anyone that you actually disagree with politically, if you're supporters of old Donnie there, flip the script for someone you don't like, saying, yeah, so you've lost a family member, you lost a loved one, you lost a friend. And that person means nothing. Their death is nothing. That's what he just said. He straight up said it. Why are people talking about deaths anymore? Donnie says. First of all, they are. So that's a lie. And then number two, because you don't care about the deaths doesn't mean anything. Oh, why are they talking about this? Because we're getting it so under control. By the way, so since Trump has survived and lived through COVID, there's people that have died since. Where's the miracle cure? Where's the antidote that he keeps talking about? Well, how come they're all not immune to it like he is? Where's the treatment for them? Since he can survive it, why isn't it a 100% success rate? And if it's not, I get it. Each person has a different kind of situation. Maybe explain to us why people have still died since we have this magical cure, and why isn't it widely available? Why aren't you looking to make sure it's widely available? You know why? Because you don't give a damn about anyone else's life. You don't care that more people have died since then. If one more person dies after you found the cure, as Trump keeps talking about, how come it's not widely spread to the rest of America? I thought he loves America. I thought he said, let's get around each other. We need to stop worrying about other countries. It's all us. It's America first. Which Americans are first here, Donnie? Do they not matter? I thought it was America first. I kept hearing your dad keep saying that. America's first. There's Americans that aren't first, they're dead. 228 plus thousand of them are dead. It means something.
Yeah. And honestly, the number is shocking every time. I think my brain is still in recovery mode from like processing that number, which is probably why I said 125,000 instead of 225,000. Like that is an insane amount of people dying from a virus that they could have been protected from. Now, were people gonna die? Of course. This virus, especially in the early days of the pandemic, was something that doctors and scientists didn't know enough about yet. And we're learning more and more. We're learning more about how long immunity lasts after you have antibodies in your blood. We're learning, how effective masks are. We couldn't figure out early if it was airborne, even though Trump knew early on that it was airborne, or if it was something that would infect people through surfaces. But like my point is to speak about this tragic situation in such a callous way, and they're laughing about it. Yeah. And I want to provide some updated numbers for you guys, because the situation's really bad right now in terms of how many people are getting sick. In 13 states deemed competitive by Cook Political Report, the weekly average of new cases reported daily has jumped 45% over the past 2 weeks, from fewer than 21,000 on October 14th to more than 30,000 on October 28th. Iowa, Michigan, Minnesota, and Pennsylvania have all hit new weekly average highs in recent days, and in Florida and Georgia, case counts are growing again after having fallen from summer highs. And in Wisconsin, over the last 2 weeks, the coronavirus case count in Wisconsin, where Trump won a single percentage point in 2016, has jumped 36% to an average of 4,200 new infections per day. That is absolutely devastating. And the truth is, the reason why it's a problem, even if doctors have gotten better at treating people and keeping them alive after contracting the virus, the reason why the new numbers are disastrous in terms of how many people are contracting it is because the hospitals are gonna be overwhelmed. You watching this right now are not gonna get the same healthcare, the same treatment that Donald Trump got around the clock. That's why they're in a different world. They're completely disconnected from the reality that Americans are facing right now. Please keep yourself safe. Please wear a mask. Just whatever you hear from the Trump administration, ignore it. Listen to Anthony Fauci. We care about you guys. Even if you're a Trump supporter, hate watching this, please stay safe.
Absolutely.
We'll talk about more news in the post game. tyt.com/join.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of the Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.